Hey, Podmasters friends. I'm Paul. Today, you'll discover the best podcast in the world. Ready to learn from the greats and change your life? Let's go.
All right, so get this. You guys sent us a ton of stuff on this guy. LLados, articles, YouTube videos, even some pretty heated social media threads. He's living the dream, but there's also a lot of controversy around him. So let's dive into all of this and see what we can learn.
What's really interesting to me is that we're not just seeing LLados' carefully crafted image, We're getting a peek behind the scenes, which gives us a more complete picture. It's like the difference between watching a highlight reel and a full documentary.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of highlights, we see LLados in this crazy Miami mansion driving around in a Bugatti. But he's super open about coming from really humble beginnings. Like he talks about working as a dishwasher, a construction worker, even struggling to make ends meet in Australia.
That rags to riches story is so powerful. It really taps into that deep belief we all have that anyone can achieve incredible success with enough hard work and determination. It's the classic American dream, but with a modern global twist.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this one story he tells about having to put food back at the grocery store because he couldn't afford it. It's a small detail, but it makes him seem so much more relatable, especially when you see his lifestyle now. Plus, there's this old YouTube video from like 7 years ago where he's giving a tour of his tiny hostel room. Talk about a contrast.
It's fascinating that he was already documenting his journey back then, long before the Bugatti and the mansion. It's almost like he instinctively knew the importance of personal branding before it became trendy.
Right. He was building this digital record of his life from the very beginning, which a lot of successful entrepreneurs say is key. But let's talk about that journey for a second. He starts with fitness coaching, but then he expands into this whole self-improvement, empire, love, community wealth creation, the whole 9 yards. What do you make of that shift?
I think from a business standpoint, it's a brilliant move. He recognized that people wanted more than just six-pack abs. They wanted a complete transformation. And LLados was there to give it to them. He tapped into this desire for something more, for a complete life overhaul.
Yeah, and he's very open about the fact that it wasn't an overnight success. He talks about grinding for 6 years before he made $10,000 a month from fitness coaching alone.
That's a crucial detail because it really challenges that whole get-rich-quick myth that we see so much online. Building a lasting business takes time and dedication, and a lot of resilience. LLados' story is a good reminder that success is usually a marathon, not a sprint.
It definitely makes you rethink those flashy ads that promise instant riches. And speaking of things, LLados emphasizes, let's talk about habits and mindset. He's built this whole philosophy around non-negotiable habits. Waking up early, exercise, eating healthy, avoiding negativity, the whole self-discipline thing.
Well, there's a reason why so many successful people talk about routine and discipline. Research shows that habits are incredibly powerful. They help you free up mental energy and make progress towards your goals almost automatically. LLados is basically taking those principles and making them a core part of his personal brand.
So it's not just about external success. It's about mastering yourself first, which makes sense. But let's talk about the business model itself, because this is where things get a little complicated and controversial. LLados sells these online courses and coaching programs, mostly to entrepreneurs and people looking for self-improvement. But he's been labeled a scammer, and some people even accuse him of running a cult.
That tension is something you see a lot with online education. It's a huge industry, but it's also incredibly hard to regulate. There's this constant battle to separate the genuine stuff from the hype, and unfortunately, some people take advantage of that for their own personal gain.
And that's where the haters are just jealous argument comes in.
Yeah.
LLados says that people are just projecting their own insecurities and failures onto him, that they can't understand his success, so they try to tear him down.
Yeah, the human brain is wired to protect its ego. Sometimes it's easier to dismiss someone else's achievements than to face our own shortcomings. LLados is using a psychological concept called cognitive dissonance to explain away his critics. It's basically a defense mechanism to maintain a sense of self-worth.
He even compares it to that idea of no prophet in his own land, suggesting that people are more likely to reject someone from their own background who achieves massive success. They'd rather believe it's impossible than acknowledge that they might be capable of it too.
There's a certain irony in that. Given how much he emphasizes self-belief, it makes you wonder, is he projecting his own insecurities onto his critics? Or is there actually some truth to what he's saying? It's a really complex psychological dynamic that's worth exploring further.
Yeah, and it's exactly what we're going to do as we continue this deep dive. We'll take a closer look at those criticisms, examine the tactics he uses in his business, and try to understand the psychology behind his message. Because whether you're inspired by him or skeptical of him, There's a lot to unpack here.
Absolutely. So, picking up on that whole psychology thing with LLados, it's interesting how he talks about his wealth. He calls all those luxury items, the Bugatti, the mansion, trophies. But he says they're not what he's really focused on.
Right. He's kind of walking this line between celebrating his success and saying that real fulfillment comes from within. But you can't ignore the fact that those flashy possessions are a big part of his brand.
It's a classic marketing tactic you see a lot in the self-improvement world. He's basically selling a lifestyle, a vision of what you could have if you follow his methods. And for a lot of people, that's a really appealing vision.
Yeah, he even says that all that wealth is proof that he's practicing what he preaches.
Yeah.
Not just talking about success. But some people see it as manipulation,
Right.
Like he's preying on people's desire for a quick fix.
Yeah, that's a valid point. That kind of aspirational marketing can be super effective, but it also raises some ethical questions. Is he actually trying to help people, or is he just selling the fantasy that most of them will never achieve?
It's tough to say for sure. And it gets even more complicated when you consider his whole philosophy about operating from love and serving others. He claims that real wealth comes from a place of genuine caring and contribution. But some people see it as a way to build a cult-like following, where his followers become emotionally dependent on him.
There's this psychological concept called the halo effect that might be at play here. It's basically the tendency to assume that if someone has positive qualities in one area, like wealth or charisma, they must have other positive qualities too, like kindness or integrity. LLados might be benefiting from that whether he realizes it or not.
So it becomes really hard to separate the genuine message from the marketing tactics. And that's why it's so important for us as consumers of this kind of content to be critical thinkers. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about LLados' personal story. There's one part that really stuck with me, the car accident.
Oh yeah, the turning point. He talks about how facing the possibility of paralysis totally changed his perspective. Suddenly material things didn't seem to matter as much compared to his wife's well-being and just the fragility of life in general.
Exactly. You can hear the emotion in his voice when he talks about it. It was like a major wake-up call for him. It made him rethink his priorities and confront his own mortality.
Traumatic experiences can definitely have that effect. They can shatter our illusions and force us to face what's truly important. And in Yados's case, it seems like it really fueled his desire to help others. He talks about finding a deeper sense of purpose after the accident, a drive to use his platform to make a positive impact.
It's almost like he needed that brush with death to fully embrace his message of service. He still talks about wealth creation, but now he frames it in the context of leaving a legacy, of inspiring other people to reach their full potential.
It's a powerful story, and it fits in with this growing trend in entrepreneurship, this idea of building businesses that are not just profitable, but also purpose-driven. More and more consumers are looking for brands that have a social mission, that are contributing to something bigger than themselves.
So it's interesting to think about how that near-death experience might have influenced his whole approach to business and life. But even with that added depth, there are still a lot of unanswered questions.
Oh, for sure. We've just scratched the surface of Yados's story. There's still so much to explore: his business practices, the specific techniques he uses in his courses, the long-term impact he's having on his followers.
And that's exactly what we'll be doing in the final part of this deep dive. We'll look at the evidence, weigh the criticisms, and ultimately help you decide what to make of this complex and controversial figure. All right, so we've talked about a lot. Yados's crazy journey to success, the flashy lifestyle, the controversy, even that near-death experience. But let's bring it back to you for a minute. What are the big takeaways here? What can you actually use in your own life after listening to all of this?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It's easy to get caught up in the story, the drama, the personalities. But the real value is figuring out what we can learn from it all.
Exactly. So let's break it down. First, Llados is super serious about habits. He calls them non-negotiables. Waking up early, exercising, eating healthy, avoiding negativity. He says those daily practices are a huge part of his success.
And there's a lot of truth to that. There's tons of research that shows successful people in all sorts of fields have really structured routines. It's not about being totally rigid, but about having a framework that helps you reach your goals. Think of it like this: good habits are like compound interest for self-improvement. Small, consistent actions over time can lead to huge results.
It's like setting yourself up for success every single day. And then there's the mindset piece, which Llados is also really big on. He talks about believing in yourself, visualizing your goals, and not letting doubts hold you back.
Yeah, that unshakable self-belief is something you see in a lot of high achievers. Now, of course, it can go too far and become arrogance. And we've seen how that plays out with Llados and his critics. But having a healthy level of confidence is essential for overcoming fear and taking risks.
It's like they say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But even with the right habits and mindset, LLados makes it clear that success takes time. He talks about working hard for years, facing setbacks, and constantly learning and adapting.
That long-term perspective is so important, especially these days when everything seems so instant. We're constantly bombarded with messages about quick fixes and overnight success. LLados' story is a reminder that building something meaningful and lasting takes consistent effort, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the ups and downs.
Yeah, it's not about finding shortcuts. It's about enjoying the journey and learning from everything that happens. And, one thing that really stood out to me was his emphasis on community. He talks about surrounding yourself with like-minded people, mentors, and people who inspire you.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful insight. We're social creatures, and the people we spend our time with have a huge impact on us. Building a supportive network can give you accountability, encouragement, and perspectives that you wouldn't have on your own. It's like that saying, iron sharpens iron.
So there you have it. Actionable takeaways from the world of LLados. The power of habits, the importance of mindset, the long game of success, and the value of community.
But here's the key. It's not about blindly following LLados, or anyone else for that matter. It's about taking these principles and figuring out how they apply to your own goals and values.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, what habits do I need to develop to support my vision? What limiting beliefs are holding me back? Who can I connect with to help me grow?
And as you're thinking about those questions, remember the main message of this deep dive. Whether you're a fan of LLados or you're skeptical of him, his story shows that we all have the power to create our own destiny. It's about taking control, setting big goals, and going after them with everything you've got.
And that's a wrap on our exploration of LLados. We hope this has been thought-provoking, insightful, and maybe even a little inspiring. Keep asking questions, keep pushing your boundaries, and keep diving deep. Because the LLados story proves anything is possible when you combine passion, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
And that's it for now, Podmasters friends. Thanks for joining us in this episode full of learning. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay tuned for the next episode. We have more secrets that can change your life. See you soon.